issue. I'm sure you don't want that.
I really don't. Let's get going. Let's see, everything's good. So thank you guys for staying for part 2. Realize this is a long workshop. For those of you who don't know me, I am the GCC Assistant Director, and my name's Nisha Shanmugaraj. So hopefully you learned some great stuff with my colleague Julianne about designing research posters. Now I want to switch to another very common medium that's used in conferences, basically everywhere, all over industry, all over academia, and that is PowerPoint presentations. So this is actually my favorite workshop to do. This workshop is a bit of a brainchild for me, and I really like it, and I hope you critically engage with it as much as I have. So I actually want to start out by maybe refreshing your memory a little about the status quo, as it were, or the current practices used with PowerPoint slides. So what I want you guys to do, it's okay if you're not in this field, I'm going to show you some real-life examples of PowerPoint slides. And I want you to give me your gut reaction to these slides. And again, these are real slides. Oh no! Gut reactions, what do you think? Just shout them out. Too much text. Yes, way too much text. I do not want to read all of this text. It seems very hard. My attention specifically draws to the warfarin was used as a rat poison because it's like the easiest one to read. I don't think that's really their bottom line. Let's take a look at another one, and this one is from a graduate student, not from CMU, in computer science. Oopsies. Thoughts? Definitely, yeah. The clip art, I think, is trivializing the seriousness of this. If I was looking at this or watching this presentation in a conference, I think my evaluation of the speaker's credibility would maybe go down a little just based on this slide. It's not a good thing. What else? Strobe lights everywhere. Yeah. A little much. We talked about, Julianne talked about 2 to 3 colors. I think this is definitely overboard on all the different stuff going on. Any other thoughts on this one?
Still a lot of text.
Still too much text, okay. Let's take out one last example. Other end of the spectrum. What about this? What about this chemical compound? So I like to show these slides because it kind of reminds you about the presentations that you have probably seen in your lifetime in the past year, maybe probably in the last week. So PowerPoint as a medium is intended to serve as a visual complement to what you're saying, to reinforce your verbal message that you are delivering. Because you, the presenter, are still the main character of this show. But unfortunately, most PowerPoint does not do that. So most PowerPoint presentations that I see, not just in my work at the GCC, but also in various other contexts, does not reinforce my verbal narration, but actually detracts from it, and maybe even distracts. This is a big problem. PowerPoint is a widely used medium almost everywhere in your life, basically. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to start with the problem, even push on this problem a little bit more, why this problem occurs with PowerPoint. I then want to thankfully go over a solution, and that's going to be the main chunks of our workshop today. In the last couple minutes, I want to talk about making a GCC appointment, and maybe those of you who have seen that like 2-minute spiel can actually look at my slides with kind of a new lens, because I do design all of my slides, whether I'm teaching my class, giving a conference, or giving a workshop with this method. So the problem with PowerPoint. So research was done, I think kind of cool research actually, on what was annoying to people about PowerPoint. So what was bothersome and irritating, and they surveyed students and experts in the field. So what was bothersome? Here's what they found. No surprises there. So just like you guys identified, text-heavy slides were rated as very bothersome to people. In addition, any confusing or unnecessary visuals. Any visual, I hope to God you guys have never made a pie graph like that, but any visuals that make you work very hard as an audience member to figure out what is going on, people reacted very negatively to that. Across the board, people hated unnecessary animation, so avoid those at all costs. They were perceived as very, very childish. But kind of what I wanna pause on and draw your attention to is what I'm gonna argue is the primary culprit of ineffective PowerPoints. And that is the template that PowerPoint itself provides to you. So the template that PowerPoint provides, if you open up a new presentation in PowerPoint, it gives you the title slide. This is the conventional template. There is a phrasal heading, so just a quick phrase for the heading, and then it encourages you to do a fragmented bulleted list. It encourages that both with the font size, and it actually supplies those bullets there for you. What I want to argue and maybe hopefully convince you over the next couple minutes is that this is not an effective way to structure your slides. So let's talk a little bit about why. So this template is very, very wonderful for me, the presenter, especially if I'm nervous and especially if I haven't practiced a lot. Because I can just come up here and be like, okay, digital acquisition systems. All right, I'm talking about digital acquisition systems. So their accelerator outputs an analog voltage. So I have each one of my talking points right on the screen. So it's very, very useful for me as a speaker. But unfortunately, as you guys have probably experienced firsthand, this is not an effective template for you, the audience. When you are looking at this template, it is very hard for you to figure out what is the point here? What am I trying to convey? What is the main idea of this slide? So very often, people will just kind of completely disregard the PowerPoint slide and instead just say, okay, let's think about the speaker. Just listen to the speaker. And this is kind of an underlying problem. So one of the main problems, not really a bottom line here. And those of you who came to our workshop a couple weeks ago about bottom lines know how crazy I am about having a bottom line that you're trying to convey. But there is another problem with this template of slide design, and I actually want to show you through a little bit of like a thought experiment, if you will. So go ahead and take a look at the screen here. When I'm saying this, you cannot simultaneously process my verbal narration and the textual words on the screen because physically, you just can't cognitively process both at the same time. So you're either going to be toggling back and forth, but really missing some key information, listening to me and not really understanding the text, or just reading the text and zoning me right out. So which are you doing? So which one were you guys? Who's doing one, toggling? Show of hands. Okay, interesting. Who was doing option 2? Just listening to me and not understanding the text. Okay, a lot more people there. Anyone just trying to read the text and zone me out? You were trying to do that? It's hard. I'm very loud, so that's a very hard thing to do. So many people, and some people didn't vote, but many people do pick the first 2. So many people just say it's easier to listen, especially if the speaker is more engaging, it's easier to listen to them. But often many people, you guys, since you were prepared in this controlled experiment, if you will, you're like, I'm ready, I'm doing it, you know? Your brains are ready and you're trying to go back and forth between these 2 inputs. And maybe you were succeeding. Maybe you were going back and forth so fast that you were like, yeah, I did it. I defied the odds. But think about this. Even if you did manage to do that and did manage to, I was deliberately placing you under cognitive overload. I was deliberately forcing 2 different inputs onto you, the input of my voice and the input of the words on the screen. And even if your brains were able to do that, you're energized, I just had pizza, you know, even if your brains were able to do that, you can kind of remember how much effort that took, how much cognitive effort that took, how much concentration it took to really pay attention to both of these inputs. And if you think about sustaining such a level of exertion through an hour-long presentation, you're likely going to leave that PowerPoint presentation feeling just depleted of cognitive energy, just feeling exhausted, which is obviously a bad thing, right? You want people to leave your workshop like, wow, what a great project. I want to work with them and you know, whatever. So that's our core problem. Let's look at an alternative of this. So that's your brain. Visual and verbal inputs go into different parts of your brain. Oversimplified, but still very true. So visual inputs, so things like diagrams, figures, charts that you might have, any visual is processed by one area of your brain. Verbal inputs, on the other hand, are processed by another area of your brain. So verbal inputs being obviously the words that I'm saying, but also words on the screen. And because these two inputs are processed differently, you can actually process them simultaneously. You can process them at the same time. And you guys are actually seeing this right now. You are hearing the words that I'm saying and then mapping them conceptually onto this visual. So this is actually a little thing called dual coding theory. So this, again, suggests that pairing these two inputs is effective because it actually increases retention of that information. So we took like a side route into like some very oversimplified cognitive research here. So what is the implication of that? The implication is that text-heavy slides hurt comprehension. Plain and simple. If you are talking, and if you're talking quickly, which most people do when they're feeling a little bit nervous in a presentation, and if you have a text-heavy slide, that is actually putting your audience under cognitive overload, and it is burdening them. In addition, text-heavy slides bury the bottom line. So the single main idea that you want your slide to have is very, very hard to find and forces your audience to do a lot of work. So what can we do here? We understand the problem now. Is there a way to fix this? So I'm not the only one who thought this was a huge problem. A lot of people did, especially in industry, especially in fields like consulting. But finally, it's melded over to academia. And the number one person spearheading a solution, so a new model of slide design, his name is actually Michael Alley. And he is an engineering professor at Penn State University, so in Pennsylvania. So that's what I want to talk to you all about now, this new model of slide design that he has proposed and found quantitatively to be more effective. So this approach is called the assertion-evidence approach. And I want to go over it. It's basically the most important thing that this workshop is going to give you. Here's our before slide. So typical fragmented bulleted list with your phrasal heading. Here's our after slide, and you guys already saw this visual in the poster part of this. Now, when considering the slide design, there are two things I would like to draw your attention to. So the first thing about this assertion evidence model is the assertion. So you have the single bottom line, the main idea of this slide, distilled into one sentence, that's your newspaper headline, and put at the bottom of the slide, or at the top of the slide, rather. You then have in the body of the slide the visual evidence that confirms that, maybe elaborates a little bit, but provides some type of evidence for that main assertion that you have. Now the main difference, again, if we take a look at the before versus the after, really is giving the audience the bottom line first. So I'm not saying that this is the standalone, right? With this one, I was kind of drowning you in the details. I was throwing all the details at you right away. This one, you're still getting those details. It's just with a greater sense of priority. So what I mean by that is this is the bottom line. So basically, triple therapy helped reduce the ulcer recurrence. I'm going to let you internalize that bottom line. That's now your framework for the slide. And now, because I'm the main character in this story, I, the presenter, am going to verbally deliver the details to you. So this was done over a period of 40 weeks, and what we actually more specifically found was blah, 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 blah. So I'm verbally giving you those details instead of trying to overload them on the slide themselves. I'm sure you guys are going to have a lot of questions. I want to go through the examples before I take those questions because I welcome questions and challenges to this method. So this is kind of getting to the assumption that slides, like paragraphs, should be held together by a single bottom line. This visual will look familiar to those of you who've been to previous workshops, but I do like to clarify what I mean when I say bottom line, because it's a little bit colloquial. So bottom line is basically, in accounting, in finance, if you're looking at a spreadsheet of your net profits and loss, the bottom line is actually the main thing you should be looking at. It's literally the bottom rows of this Excel spreadsheet that tell you what is the net profit and net loss. That's the main thing I'm going to be looking at because that's my bottom line. That's the main information I need. The rest of this table has more details, more elaboration, if I so choose to engage with that. So that's what I mean when I say bottom line. Slides should be held together by your bottom line of that slide. Again, I'm going to hold off on questions before we look at just 3 examples, so hold on to them. And I do want to say, so some people have a gut reaction when I give this workshop, and I've given this workshop a lot. Some people have a gut reaction of, no, I hate it, I don't want it. So let me tell you something. It is a tool, not a rule. So some people have that gut reaction because maybe they think I'm saying for the rest of your life, from now on, you need to use this method. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a tool that is proven to be effective. You do not need to use it in all of your slides, but in many, many cases, it can be really effective. So I do like to just clarify that a little bit. So let's look at a couple examples. Again, a real slide. What is the main idea of this slide? What would your bottom line be? What was it? The green text, okay. Can you consolidate that for us into a bottom line? You're like, I didn't know I was going to. Can anyone consolidate the bottom line into a little bit more distilled? No wrong answers. The authors aren't here, I hope. I found it online. Okay, so the bottom line is that there's some process involved with producing Librium? Sure, yeah, sounds right to me. I thought it was basically that, a little bit different, a little bit of added information, so here's how I chose to revise the slide. And actually, I just gave this workshop to a chemical engineering department, and they said, this is not right, it should be expected molecule. Forgot to change that. But at any rate, so here's the difference. Again, I don't know if that's right. I would have to ask the authors. The fact that I don't know if that's right makes me feel like the authors should have made that more clear in the first place. So we went, though, from this, so a couple sentences, to a more distilled bottom line. This is the main thing that I want people to understand. There's also, I like this slide because it had this really nice visual, but as a non-expert especially, I wasn't exactly sure what you wanted me to understand from this. So I did add some annotations, super easy, just adding text boxes. I also added some call-outs that guide the audience's understanding of the visual. So I'm basically saying, hey you, look at these specific parts of this diagram. And again, super easy. I just took a shape, I added a shape, and then made that shape transparent. All very, very straightforward stuff. So oftentimes people will ask, well, why does it have to be a sentence? Why does that bottom line, that newspaper headline, have to be a sentence? Did Julianne already go over this? Just want to make sure I'm not repeating. Okay, all right. So why can't it be something more like this? And the answer there is that people, readers of English, and actually all languages, I suppose, readers process information in a unit of meaning. And a unit of meaning is just a sentence. But a sentence is a subject and a verb. So quite literally, if you're reading a sentence, your brain doesn't know what's going on until you hit that verb. Otherwise, it could be anything. And that's why we say newspaper headline, because if you look at any newspaper headline, it has a subject and a verb, because that's how people process information. So for instance, you would not see results of World Cup. You would see Brazil wins World Cup. You would actually get that bottom line. I was going to make an election joke, but I think I'm still too sad. So that's one thought there. So many of you are going to be using PowerPoint to present your research. And again, this is this IMRAD structure that Julianne discussed. So the assertion-evidence model is very, very useful when conveying your results. And I actually want to demonstrate why in an example. So what is the main idea of this slide? I think you guys can actually get this one. Single bottom line of the slide.
Before and after doesn't seem that different.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So before and after of this fog warning system, 0.2 of a mile per hour, that's nothing. Basically useless. Let's not implement this system. Wrong. That was totally wrong of what the authors actually wanted. Here's what they wanted to say. And I actually learned something new. Most accidents on the road are actually not caused by people speeding, but by a high standard deviation of speeds of vehicles on the road. Interesting. But the point is here that, and people in our, in one of the other great communication centers on campus, PCR, they said in one of their workshops, and I loved it, never leave an audience alone with your data. And I think that's just so funny because it's so true. So we were left alone, unsupervised with this data, and we came to a totally wrong understanding of it. And I hate to break this to you, but everyone in an audience, whether it's this workshop or a class or a conference, people zone out. If only for a couple seconds or for as long as like 20 minutes. People need to send an email, they think of something else and they take some notes. Everyone zones out. What? Why would it tell me this right now? Goodness gracious. Sorry about that. So if I was, let's say you are pitching me a product. Let's say you're pitching me this product, this fog warning system. If I was listening to your product pitch, I'm an investor, and I had to zone out for a little while in this slide while you were talking, and I missed your bottom line, I would come to and be like, oh, next product, this one's useless. So that you can see how kind of catastrophic that is. So I think that this assertion evidence model much better leverages the realistic expectations of how an audience is going to be interacting with your presentation. So one last quick example here. So we have this slide. This is like a model, just an equation, typical, might see. It's not awful. You know, you could be talking through it. But especially if you have people who aren't sure what is going on, people who are a little bit outside your field, something like this might be a little more effective. And again, not in this field, as my just might be right. But you can still take these principles, right? You can still take these and apply them to your own. I would say one of the hardest parts of this assertion evidence model, and when I came to the GCC 4 years ago, I had never used this before. And this was the hardest part for me, actually finding ways to think visually. So it has been a challenge, but I think a very productive one. Being able to think visually is a very, very productive skill. So yeah, learning how to visualize concepts behind whatever you're talking about is hard, but definitely, I think, worthwhile. A common question I get is the sort of desperate, what if I need that bulleted list? And my answer there is, you know, no, there's no PowerPoint police. You can still use a bulleted list. Nothing bad will happen. But I am encouraging you to consider, is this really the most effective way to get across your point? Some people they're very attached to the details because they've done all those nitty-gritty details, so they want the audience to understand them. And I get that, but that's not how people understand information. So when I look at this list, unless I have some sort of photographic memory, I'm not going to look at this list, internalize it, and then later that day, you know, at night after the whole conference is over, think back and be like, wow, that was such an interesting point about that bulleted list. Like, that's not how people remember things. They remember them in units of meaning. They remember that bottom line. So consider that. And something else you can do instead of a bulleted list is use SmartArt to find some way to visualize your concept. So SmartArt is a nice like intermediary step. Basically, it's super easy in Microsoft Word and PowerPoint. It's just kind of an infographic thing. Very, very easy to use. Other times that I don't use this model, an overview slide. So I always have an overview slide if I'm doing presentations over 15 minutes. And I think it's really useful because it kind of, A, primes people for your bottom line, and B, forces you to distill your own bottom line, right? Like you take your bottom line, you have to kind of synthesize it into 3 or 4 main points. So I think that's very useful. And again, another time when I don't use the assertion evidence model. I also use transition slides that don't use the assertion evidence model. And sometimes my transition slides look like this, so kind of track progress. I will say, people ask me this, so what about a more fancy progression bar? Yeah, it's fine if you want to use it. I would caution you, but I myself am a self-admitted minimalist. If I look at your slide and the first thing I think is, wow, what a beautiful progression bar, it's probably not doing what you want that slide to do. So keep in mind this is valuable real estate on the slide, and that anything does take up space there. So make sure it's worth it. Make sure it's really worth it. Here's another way too, instead of having a bulleted list, you could add these annotations that have information on the slide, but you're not competing. There's more of a priority there, a prioritization. There's the main idea and then sort of secondary details. So that's also an option. So identifying your bottom line can be very, very difficult, and that is largely why it's very effective to make a GCC appointment and actually start doing that. But a good way to do this is really force yourself, and try this just in terms of one slide first. If my audience could only remember one single thing, one single sentence from this slide, from everything I'm going to say in this slide, what would it be? Force yourself to actually write that down, because odds are that's going to be your bottom line or very, very close to your bottom line. So that's a very good strategy. Something else though. So not only should your slide have a bottom line, but your entire presentation should have a bottom line. So consider that in kind of a bigger context as well. If people walk away from my presentation only remembering one thing, what would that thing be? For me, my bottom line is I hope you remember the assertion evidence model. I really, really hope that's the one thing that you take away from this. But keep that in mind when you're presenting at a conference. What is your newspaper headline, right? What is the one thing you want people to walk away from this presentation remembering and knowing? It leads to a much more unified presentation. We don't have time to delve too much into an overall structure of your entire presentation and public speaking skills. But I am very excited because next semester, and I'm in the process of developing this with lots of Steve Jobs YouTube videos, of developing a presentation skills workshop. So get ready for that next semester. So let's see. Other things to note on our topic today, which is more micro, so actual slide design. You do want to keep your heading left aligned. We already talked about why justified looks a little wonky, especially in PowerPoint. 2 lines max, because that is what Ali did in the studies that he actually found these increases in comprehension and retention. And I would also say at least 30-point font. That kind of depends on the room though. In a room like this, very small, you should be fine with smaller than that. So I would kind of do a test run in your room. The last thing I would say is a counter argument that I sometimes get from I never get it from undergrads, I only get it from grad students. Isn't this model too crazy? So I've never seen people do this model. Wouldn't it be weird if I did it? I have a lot of things to say to that, but I'll only say a couple things. One of the things I want to say to that is that I do not believe it is the ethos of CMU to continue replicating the status quo when we know it doesn't work, and just keep saying, well, everyone else is doing it, so I'm going to do it too. So I don't agree with that. Number two, I'll tell a story. First. So we hold a dissertation boot camp, and I do this workshop for the dissertation boot camp, and a PhD candidate in the physics department saw this workshop and loved it, absolutely loved it. It changed my life. So she wanted to try it out, and she told her advisor about it, and her advisor was like, nope. I do not want to see any sentences, any complete sentences on your slides, absolutely not. But in the business department, like many other departments, they have smaller departmental update meetings with just like your peers most of the time, where you let people know how your research is going, and they're lower stakes, so she decided to try out this assertion evidence model in that setting. Usually faculty don't come to that. For some reason, her advisor did show up to that departmental update meeting. And so she was nervous, obviously, because he basically said very strongly, don't do it, and she did it anyways. So she went up to him after, and she was like, so what did you think? I decided to try out that model, that slide design thing I was telling you about. And his response, which I realize seems anticlimactic to you, but was perfect to me, his response was, "Oh, I didn't even realize you did that." So that's funny to me because people only notice the design of your slides if it's bad. In 9 out of 10 cases, in